Well, hiya, it's Marcus, and welcome to more Zooming in the Jungle Room. This time I am Zooming all the way to New York, Brooklyn, where I'm speaking to a guy. He's called Chris Turner. But hang on a minute. He is a comedian, a rapper, a rock star. We're going to find out if he's going to be wearing all of those hats right now. Zoom to Chris. Hey, Chris, how are you?
Hello, Marcus, and hello, everyone. You maybe I like subconsciously looked. Do I have like 15 baseball hats up there? And as soon as you said hats, I was like, is it funny to put them on? No, it'll just look confusing. But metaphorical hats firmly on.
Now, of course, you're in New York at the moment, as we said.
Yeah,
It is winter over there.
it's
How?
very cold, very chilly, lots of wind. Occasionally, out of nowhere, there'll just be snow. At least you hope it's snow. I mean, it's New York, so it could be whatever. Um, just dumping itself on us. And yeah, so gosh, Adelaide cannot come soon enough to get over there for the Fringe.
Well, I've got some very exciting news for you. It is warm here finally. It took us a while for summer to kick off, but it's finally here, all ready for Fringe. You know what? I've always said that if you want some summer, put on the Adelaide Fringe and it will happen. Because, yeah, I think we're in for an incredible 4 weeks very, very shortly. It's only a week away, Chris, till it actually starts.
I know, yeah. I'm rocking up halfway through. I'm kind of letting everyone get into the swing of it, iron the kinks out, and then jetting in halfway, being like, "Hey guys, everyone else will be tired. They'll all be worn out. I come fresh, ready
Yeah.
to impress."
You know what? We'll call the first 2 weeks just a dress rehearsal.
Yeah,
And your
the
time,
warm up.
like the show. Yeah, exactly. Hey, so speaking of your show, it is called Childish. It runs from the 5th of March to the 17th of March in the Kingfisher in Gluttony. I love Gluttony. It's amazing. Can you please tell me about your show though, Childish?
Yeah, so Childish is a musical comedy show. That's the main thing. I've got a band. This is the first time I've toured a show with a live band. So we have an incredible keyboard player all the way from London. We have an incredible drummer all the way from Adelaide. But he did used to live in America, and he's a professor of jazz improvisation. And I was like, yeah, just get on the drums, mate. And then I'll be rocking out on a guitar.
Who's that
Um,
pianist? Who is the
uh,
pianist?
the piano player is Mr. Dylan Townley, who is
Oh,
a massive get. He's a oh gosh, a critically lauded and acclaimed musical composer and director from the United Kingdom, who I've worked with for 12 years. So it was me calling in a favor, being like, remember we're mates, yeah? I know you're quite famous now, but do you want to come to Adelaide?
uh,
Um, and he didn't even ask for business class flights, so that was a relief. The show itself is just, I mean, it's an hour of. I kind of describe it as if Tim Minchin had a smaller orchestra, or if Bo Burnham was slightly less talented. It's an hour of comedy songs, all strung together with a narrative about growing up, about kind of following in what can seem to be really ridiculous dreams, and there's a couple of twists and revelations that I won't spoil, and some big musical surprises along the way. And I can confidently say it's very good because I've been testing it in New York, and just the same as Adelaide. I've done Adelaide before. Audiences will tell you when something is bad, and New York audiences are exactly the same. Because when you're doing musical comedy in the city where there is Broadway, people will just, if they don't like it, they're like, yeah, I can go and see Wicked right now. So
I,
yeah, so it's a great show, and I'm really really excited to bring it over.
it's so funny you should drop the name Tim Minchin, who's just incredible and I mean world famous now, which is amazing. But he is literally playing 3 shows in Adelaide right now. So yeah, he's here last night, tonight, and Saturday night as well, I think. So yeah,
That's
brilliant.
kind of him to do it outside the Fringe to leave some audience for the rest of us.
I know, right? Exactly. But hey, so back to you. Last time you were at the Adelaide Fringe was 8 years ago. That was like well before that COVID period. Wow.
Yeah.
Why the big hiatus?
Yeah, so the last time I was in Adelaide was great. It was my second time there. I'd come in 2014. I had to skip a year. and then came back in 2016, won a comedy award, was like, this is great. And then that was the year I moved to America. So I used to live in the UK, moved over here, and America was challenging for those first few years. I had no money, so I couldn't just be like, I'm flying off to Australia again. And then I was like, okay, I can dip my toes back in the water in 2020. So I went to Perth and did the Fringe there and was like, right, I'll get a feel. Do I think next year will be good to do Perth, then Adelaide, then maybe Perth and Adelaide, then Melbourne? And obviously 2021, 2022. And then I had a baby. So
Oh, yeah,
that
congratulations.
yeah, to give away one surprise in the show. Oh, why is he called the show Childish? Why is he suddenly so obsessed with childhood and growing up? I wonder. I had a baby.
Yeah.
And so 2023 I was going to come, and then I was just like, no, I can't leave my baby. She was too small. Now she's bigger. She can sustain, and I'm coming over. And yeah, it's taken a while, but I mean, the main reason as well was one of the people who run Gluttony, he saw me in Edinburgh last year. I was doing a different show, and he was like, this is fun. You should come and play Gluttony. And I was like, oh, well, that's a nice offer. I've never done that before. I know it's a really great venue. And he was like, you should come out. So I said, okay, let's actually do it. And I managed to pull in some favors so that my wife will very kindly stay here and look after a child for 3 weeks.
I love that. Gluttony, I think you're going to be surprised because Gluttony has been around for a good few years, obviously. But the growth that it's undertaken, I reckon last time when you were here, it was probably one or two kind of venues inside Gluttony. It is mammoth now. It has grown to epic proportions. I don't know if you remember the Garden of Unearthly Delights right next door.
Yeah.
But Gluttony is pretty much exactly the same size, if not maybe even a little bit bigger. It's huge. You could get lost in it.
I mean, my first Adelaide, I was if that's the Adelaide rectangle, I was right in the middle in a thing called the Royal Croquet Club.
Yeah.
That was mad. I mean, I had a great year. My venue was outdoors. The backdrop was just a stack of amplifiers, and there was a tame donkey that was always standing at the entrance to my venue. So it was like a petting zoo on the way in. And then you'd have 100 people sat around. They were like, we just touched a donkey. And I'd have to come on and be like, yeah, that's part of the show. Buy a ticket to the boy, you get your donkey. That was 10 years ago. That was, that was a show I performed wearing like a tank top, like a basketball jersey. So I've matured because this time I'll be wearing a suit.
Oh, there we go. A step up.
A real step up. Yeah. I mean, also an absolute catastrophic costume error based on how hot it's going to be. But it will look good.
The venues are so well freaking air conditioned these days, which is great. You won't have a drama. In fact, they're chilly. It'll remind you of New York.
Yeah, I'll be comfortable with my suit. Everyone else will be like, I wish I had that. Like, boom, full wool covering.
Fabulous. Hey, I mean, it's been a while, so you might not be able to answer this for me, but when you do come to Adelaide, are there any cafes, restaurants, bars, beaches that you might want to visit?
I remember last time I was there, we did a wine tour. This is me and a couple of other comedians, and we ended up going to a place called Alpha Box and Dice, which then I looked, and they have a bar in Gluttony, or at least they did last year. So fingers crossed still, because we went to their vineyard and they had a tap room there, and I was with Dylan, who is my musical composer, and we got there, and there was a piano, and I was like, Dill, do you want to jump on the piano and we'll do some songs? And this is 8 years ago. So he starts playing piano. I start like rapping, because there's a few people there, and I'm just rapping about them, and people start getting into it, and they're like, hey, this is cool. And I do this little impromptu show, and at the end of it, everyone's like, yeah. And I go over to the bar like, oh, you're right. Can we get some wine, please? Assuming that we're going to get a free glass of wine. And they're like, here you go. So that'll be, however much money. You guys performing at the Fringe? I'm like, we just performed right there. So if you're watching Alpha Box and Dice, your wine's very tasty, and I want my free wine for that gig I did 8 years ago.
I'll send them the link to this video. All right, I will ensure.
Please do.
Hey, what is it about Adelaide Fringe that draws you? What gets you here?
So the fact that I turned up in 2014, and I'd only been going 5 years back then. I've been doing about comedy for 5 years. I turned up that first year and I had such a lovely time. My shows were really busy. I came back 2 years later. The shows were busier. I won an award, and I was like, oh, I felt like audiences took a chance on coming to see me, even though they didn't, had no idea who I was, and were also generous in their recommendations. Like the reason people came was because people would see me, and then they'd go, "Oh, my mate said you were good. I'll come along." And that's quite a nice vibe to have as a festival. To have a festival where word travels if the show is good, where people will be like, "Well, fair play. He's come all this way from England. We might as well go see him." This time I'm coming all the way from, New York. It's a much longer flight. I thought we were closer somehow, but I've just moved further away. I have to take so many more flights to get there. Um, but yeah, that's kind of what brought me back, because this show it's like, out of all the shows I've done, it's definitely the biggest kind of, not risk, but the biggest production. Like to have two musicians on stage, to have a bit more tech involved, to have a lot of moving parts in the show. So it's the world premiere in Adelaide. I've performed previews of it, but this will be the first proper tour run of it. And I wanted to do it in Adelaide just because I had that confidence that people would, like, if I make the show good, people will actually come. There's some festivals where you can have the best show in the world, but you might just not find the audience, right? That's one of the problems with other fringes. But I think Adelaide, if your show is good and right for the market, people will tell their mates and they'll come and see it.
People will come. There we go. To quote that line from the movie, the people will come.
To quote that line from that movie, yes. Yeah.
I gotta call it out. It looks literally like you're sitting in front of an S&M dungeon. What is that?
I can show you my S&M dungeon. This is a recording studio and booth.
Oh my goodness.
Let's not tell my daughter. This is like a pink car that she likes to ride around the apartment, this thing here.
Yeah.
But the apartment's tiny because it's New York. So she just smashes into the walls. And that's going to, we're going to have to pay to get it repainted. Yeah. And so I just told her, oh, it disappeared. I don't know where it went. I think it just drove off. So she has no idea. But no, this was where, like, I did all my, the lights are off. I did all my virtual gigs in here during COVID. It looks even more suspicious when you look in there. I don't know if you can see all these boxes.
Oh, there we go. Look at it. Yeah, wow.
That doesn't look like an S&M dungeon. That looks like the Unabomber's shack. The actual, because it's a soundproof thing, I got that from the old Disney studios on the west of Manhattan. Wow. They were demolishing it, and this guy just posted on Facebook Marketplace, I have this soundproof booth. Anyone who wants to come and get it with $1,000 cash in an envelope, it's yours. And these are worth a lot more than that. I was like, this is definitely dodgy. So I show up. The guy's like, come on, quick, before my boss gets back. I'm like, oh, you definitely aren't allowed to be selling this. And so he was like, do you have a van? I was like, no. He goes, call this number, ask for Jonathan. I call this number, ask for Jonathan. Like, immediately, a van of people not called Jonathan, who potentially technically aren't legally allowed to work in America, show up. They take it apart. They put it in the van. There's an old woman sat in the van. And I asked the driver, who's the old woman? And he goes, that's my grandmother. All right. She's just in the van. They load it in the van. They drive me to my apartment, and I had to build it all. It was an absolute nightmare. But yeah, this is stolen goods. But we're outside the statute of limitations now. I'm loving only, like, seriously, only in New York. Move to New York, get involved into street crime. Now, Chris Turner Childish is going to pretty much dominate your time while you're over here in Fringe. But, hopefully there might be a little bit of downtime. In that downtime, are there any other shows that you really want to get along and go and see, or that you can even recommend? Yes, I can recommend a show by a friend, a person whose shows I've seen. I met them 10 years ago in Adelaide. They were like my first kind of Australian friend. Clara Cupcakes, who is a kind of clown burlesque comedian, and she has a show called Ye Howdy, which is just a kind of one woman vaudeville style kind of. I mean, it's really hard to describe what she does other than it's just very silly and very funny. And I know that that show did really well in Melbourne. It did really well in Edinburgh, and her shows are always really fun. So that is, I've got my details. You can see that from the 16th to the 25th of February, and that's at 7:40 every day at the Courtyard of Curiosities at the Migration Museum. So that's Clara Cupcakes Ye Howdy. So you'll notice I'm not there when it's on, but I've seen the show in Edinburgh, so you know I can recommend it. But also, I mean, I am so busy actually because I've got another show. I've got the family friendly stand up show. I do that on the weekends, so that's one that I'll be doing. And also, if anyone's watching this, like, I've got a kid, I can't bring a kid to your show. Bring them to the family friendly stand up show. That's 2:30 on the weekends.
Love it. You've covered all bases. Something for everyone.
Yeah, S&M Dungeon, family friendly comedy.
And many hats. I'm enjoying
so
it.
many hats.
Hey, Chris Turner, you are a freaking barrel of fun to chat with. I'm so looking forward to meeting you when you get down on what I think you get here just before 5th of March. Let's catch up. Let's go and catch some of those cafes, restaurants, bars.
That'd be lovely. Yeah.
Look forward to seeing your show. It's called Chris Turner Childish, everyone. You will find it, of course, in the Gluttony program. And Chris's show is on page 18 in the amber section, and it will be right there. So
Look at that beautiful picture.
it runs from the 5th of March, 17th of March at the Kingfisher in Gluttony, like we said, in the East End. It's going to be a barrel of laughs. Chris, have the most amazing 2024 Adelaide Fringe season, and I look forward to hanging out.
Thank you. Likewise.
Yeah.